Hi everyone, good morning and good evening. Welcome to community talk session in DevDays 2022. Hope you are enjoying all the sessions so far. Uh, a brief introduction about myself. I'm Chetan Kumar Jain, working as a senior architect for Optum. I'm working from India office. Uh, it's been 17 years of experience in IT industry, dealing with multiple projects like in the analytics, data warehousing, big data, cloud computing, and interoperability. Doing my work in the analyticals world, we come across this problem where we need to exchange the analyticals data, and we wanted to do it in the interoperable fashion so that multiple systems can consume the same stream of data without doing much customization. And that's the topic for this community talk session. At the end of this topic, we would be understanding and knowing that why there is a need to exchange the analytics data and what FHIR offers to meet that requirement so that we can easily communicate between the FHIR server and FHIR client and exchange the analytics data, which can be used for different purposes. So as agenda goes, we'll first understand why there is a need to exchange the analytics data. First of all, what FHIR offers, little deeper into the structure definition mapping, and then overall solution approach step by step, followed by the Q&A. So I could not travel this time, unfortunately. So I am doing this session virtual. Uh, Feel free to ping your question in the chat box anytime. And even after this presentation, you can connect me through the email or the UHA app. So when we talk about the transactional data exchange, which is our day-to-day business requirement, we are exchanging a set of claims. We want to create a claims. We want to generate a report where what are the diagnostic reports are there. Maybe we want to update a member or patient detail which just operate on one particular record. A member might want to look at all the claims he or she submitted in last quarter or year duration, right? So all these transaction which happen on the OLTP system uh, doesn't go beyond one or few records at a time. And FHIR has plenty of resources in healthcare industry to map all these transactions very efficiently, right? So claim can map to claim and claim response and all, right? So, but if there are a requirement when we are sending multiple records, more than one records, there are other options available like list resource, um, bundle, or the group. Using this, we can go more than one record at a time, but that is not enough to handle the analytical world requirement. In analytical uh, uh, systems, when we want to look at the data of last 2 years or 3 years or more than that and wanted to bring out some measures and the KPIs out of the data, and then wanted to share those data set with multiple consumers who can use those data sets and then build a graph or a dashboard, a report, or come out with some management prediction or inputs, right? So if we just talk about one simple use case, and let's say what is my 12 months claim count by different status, right? So I have to go back to the source system, pull out all the claims in the last 12 months, see their approval status, their processing status, and then apply the filter. Maybe there are a filter like I'm just looking for one particular practitioner or one particular organization who submitted those claims. And I take out those claims, filter out, and then slice it maybe based on the line of business or the processing status or approval status, right? So there are different lenses get applies or the transformation get applies when we look at the analytical data, right? So there can be a grain difference. There can be a timeline which we need to handle. Maybe it's just year to date or entire last 1 year or a quarter or month. or any custom date, right? Same time, I want to look at the data from the different units. Like I just want to see the count or the dollar value attached to these claims, right? Similarly, there may be a filter that I'm just looking for one particular line of business or for one particular provider. And then when all this data come back, I may want to plot it with the different slices like line of business or processing status and all. So these are the different requirements we would need to handle when we share the analytical data. Right? So as such, there is no straight uh, resource available in FHIR which can help us to make this possible. But then there is a module called clinical reasoning, and then there is a quality reporting related resources called measure and measure report, which is being primarily used to exchange the clinical quality measures and the healthcare indicator for the population. And they offer the operation called dollar evaluate measure, which works upon a measure and then provide the measure report. So using these two resources and these operations, we could achieve the analytical exchange problem. Right. So if we little go deeper in the definition of these resources, if we try to understand what are these. So in the clinical reasoning, we define the different quality measures or the health indicators, which known as a clinical measure. And using this measure resource, we define those measures. Similarly, the measure report represent the response to a specific measure evaluation request written by the evaluate measure operation. So you invoke a evaluate measure operation on a particular measure, and in the response you get a resource called measure report, which populate the actual data in it. And then this evaluate measure operations come with the different parameters, uh, like measure, the practitioner, subject, report type, the duration of the data which we are looking at, period start and end date, and then the when was it last received the data set or the update of the data, right? So using these two resources and these operations, and then the set of parameters, and then if needed, we can customize or extend the set of parameters as per our filter or the grain requirement. So if you look at the overall architecture solution to address this problem, generally we source, if we go from right to left, we have a transactional data storage layer, which keep all day-to-day transaction. On top of it, we build a pipeline and then apply all the transformation, enrichment, the aggregation, and then create a aggregated storage layer, which is pre-built, which store all the measures, all the KPIs in it based on the different slices. And at the same time, the system expose the FHIR APIs, which can be consumed by the FHIR client. So the FHIR client invoke the API uh, by passing the measure name in the measure parameter for evaluate operation, and the server take that measure with other supplied parameter values, go back on the aggregated layer, pull out the data, apply those filters, and then calculation, generate a measure report response, measure report resource, and then send it back as a API response to the client. And then client further can use that response to do all their analytical need. If you look at the resource structure of the measure with all other different attribute like ID and meta and whatnot, there is a very specific section called group, and this is what where we are heavily using it to address this problem. So within a group, you have a code where you can define the measure name. So here it is claim count we are saying, and the description is claim space count. And then within it, you have a stratifier block, which is an array, and it also come with the code and criteria. So we define a criteria called month colon approval status. What does it mean? That we want to slice the data for the claim count by month by approval status. That's how we are defining the measure. So Based on all the business requirement we identified, we say that business is looking for the data sliced by month and approval status, and then accordingly we define the measure measure, right? And when FHIR consumer client or our consumer invoke the evaluate operation using that measure, we return back the measure report as a response, right? And how it is also very similar to the measure structure. Within a group you have a code, and it comes with the measure score as an additional attribute. So measure score is where you actually populate the measure value. So let's say claim count, if I say, and there are 200 claims in that given duration, the measure score would be 200, the unit. And then within the stratifier we have the stratum block. So looking at the stratifier criteria, month and approval status, what a stratum block does it, like it takes all the possible values of this combination of month and approval status and create an array of the values and then the measure score for that particular combination, right? So for a given month of January and then approval status is approved, what is the total count? And then like February, what is the approval count? For January, what is the denied count? So on and so forth. And the total of all these months and approval status is what the measure score at the group level. So as I explained, a little different view to look at the mapping of the structure. So in the group, within the group, we have the code attribute, which we use to define the measure name. And then at the code level, we have the attribute called measure score, which give at the value of that measure at the group level, entire group level for entire population. And then in the stratifier code, define the criteria, which is nothing but how we are going to slice the data. And then within stratifier, there is an array for stratum where each possible component of the criteria, like month and approval status, as I told you, goes into this code. And then for that particular combination, what is the measure score? So within stratum, we have measure score, which tells the score of that measure for that particular population, and the measure score at the code level tell the measure score value for the entire population. This is one of the sample example I have put on this slide. If you look at this, so there are resource type is measure report, status, and the duration, and all those attributes are being populated. And then within group, which is an array, we have see the code text claim count, which is our measure name, right? And then followed by the measure score, which is 255, and unit is count. So it says that 255 claims are there and it is count, right, for the entire population of this subject. And then the stratifier loops comes in, and then for each transaction month and approval status, the stratum loop through. So there are different possible combination like 2020-01 approved, 2020-01 denied, 2020-02 approved, and 02 denied, 03 approved, denied. So all these 3 months of combination of approved and denied, each combination has its own measure score and the unit, and then total sum of all this combination is 255 count. So that's how we can slice this analytical data, right? So if you look at the step-by-step approach, very first we understand the business requirement and identify what business is looking for, what kind of KPIs or measure they look for, and then based on that we define the parameters, we define the slicing requirement and the measure name, right? So all these parameters get defined and we publish it. Once it is published, in the backend we have the data ready in the aggregated layer and the evaluate measure enable on top of it. So when the client come and invoke this evaluate measure operation, we go back, pull the data, apply all the filter, put the transformation, roll up, and send it back in the measure resource format. So that's all for this talk. Hope this is going to help all the folks in the analytical worlds who are facing this challenge, how we can share the data in interoperable way in this analytical world, and we open up for the Q&A here. And as I said, in the entire DevDays duration, you can reach out to me on the UHA app, or you can email me on this email ID at any point of time, and I would be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chetan, for the excellent presentation. I don't see any questions currently in Whova, but if anyone who is in attendance live would like to ask a question now, please feel free to do so. And for those
we got one over here.
All right, great.
Good morning. This is Simon from LifeOmic. Question on, once you move or create those measure FHIR resources, do you have a way to go back to the underlying original data? For example, you want to do like drill downs, or you want to go back to the claims data, for example, that in your example, what would be the best practices to do that?
Yes. So for aggregated data, you would use measure and measure report resources. But for detailed data, like we are looking for those, hope you can hear me.
We can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
When you look at the detailed data, right, for the duration, how many claims or each claim record I want back, then it would be the normal way of exchanging the data, like list of claims or a bundle of resource within it, all the claims populated. So that's like exchanging the transaction data.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up on that. There's actually a spot and measure report that contains evaluated resources, which, depending on what application you use to process, to evaluate your measures, you could get them populated there. So it would be all the data that matches the populations could go in there.
Hi, so the use case that you provided throughout this presentation was like clinical quality measures. I'm wondering if, so obviously like measure is typically related to quality, and I understand why that was the use case that you chose for this analytics presentation. It occurs to me that obviously if you want to do analytics that don't center on clinical quality, that there'd probably be applications for these resources beyond that, right? Can you speak to how you've seen these kind of FHIR resources used for kind of more generic analytics that are not specifically tied to clinical quality measures, where the measure means like a sort of like CMS or quality measure?
Yes, the original purpose of these resources are not only to use in the clinical quality management, but then the same resource we can use in this fashion. It doesn't pose any challenge to the original use case. Right? It's an add-on use case scenario which we are doing here. So I have been discussing with the clinical track leaders in the connectathon, and then we all found like this is it's a good way to do this. As of now, there are no other way to do and achieve this solution. So ultimately, you publish the measure, what all metrics or what all KPIs you want to expose. You publish those measure in your FHIR server, and then all the consumers who are interested in those measures, they can invoke it, right? So these measures you are defining are different than what the measures are in the clinical quality. So the resources are double used, but the usage is totally different. They are not overlapping each other. So I think that's fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chetan. I think we are at time. So we want to allow our attendees to get to their next presentation. So thank you again for such a wonderful presentation. We did get a comment in chat that it was amazing. And thank you to the attendees, both online and in person. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of the event.
Thank you so much. Thank you.